Laughter filled the school cafeteria. Not the normal kind, not the careless, chaotic noise of teenagers eating lunch, shouting across tables, dropping forks, and complaining about homework. This laughter was different. It was sharp, focused, cruel. It cut through the room like glass, slicing the air and forcing every conversation to stop. One by one, voices fell silent, not because people felt uncomfortable, but because they didn't want to miss what was happening. The laughter rolled across the cafeteria like a wave, pulling everyone's attention toward a single point. A 15-year-old black girl stood frozen in the center of the room. She held a plastic lunch tray with both hands, gripping it so tightly her fingers trembled. Her shoulders were tense, her posture stiff, as if her body already knew something bad was coming, even if her mind hadn't caught up yet. She didn't understand what she had done wrong. She had walked in like she did every day. She had stood in line. She had paid for her food. Nothing about this moment should have been different. Yet suddenly, every eye in the room was on her. Some students were laughing openly, not even trying to hide it. Others leaned toward their friends, whispering with wide eyes and crooked smiles. A few lifted their phones almost automatically, instincts sharpened by years of watching humiliation turn into viral entertainment. She felt it before she heard it. That feeling, when the air changes, when you realize the room has decided you are the joke. "Yo!" A loud voice cut through the noise. "Does she even see her feet when she walks?" The laughter exploded. It wasn't just louder, it was meaner, more confident, like the crowd had been waiting for permission. She recognized that voice immediately. Everyone did. He was white, tall, loud, confident. The kind of boy who moved through the school like he owned it. His parents drove expensive cars. His shoes were always new. His confidence wasn't earned, it was inherited. Teachers warned him but never punished him. Students feared him but followed him. He had learned something very early in life. The world bent for him. He stood up slowly, deliberately, enjoying the attention. In his hand was a full carton of milk. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He wanted everyone to watch. "Seriously," he said, walking closer, his voice dripping with amusement. "I'm just curious. When was the last time you looked in a mirror?" More laughter. Someone behind him added, "They don't put girls like that in beauty contests." Another voice chimed in, louder now. "She wouldn't even fit through the door." The words hit her one by one. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Her shoulders tightened. Her grip on the tray grew so strong her knuckles turned white. She could feel her face burning. She wanted to disappear, not run, not scream, just vanish. The boy stopped directly in front of her. For a brief moment, the cafeteria went quiet. Not out of sympathy, out of anticipation. Then he tilted the carton. Cold milk poured over her head. It soaked into her hair instantly, running down her face, dripping from her eyelashes, staining the front of her school uniform. Thick white drops splashed onto the cafeteria floor, spreading like a stain no one would forget. The silence lasted half a second. Then the room erupted. Laughter, clapping, whistles. "Yo, that's wild! No way! Someone record this!" Her ears rang. Her heart slammed violently against her chest, pounding so hard it felt painful. She couldn't separate the voices anymore, just noise, just sound, just humiliation crashing down on her from every direction. She stood there, soaked and shaking, while dozens of students laughed at her as if she wasn't even human. No teacher intervened. No adult stepped forward. No one said her name. That moment lasted less than 10 seconds, but it carved itself into her memory. She dropped the tray. Plastic hit the floor. Food spilled everywhere. She didn't care. She turned and ran. Past the tables, past the pointing fingers, past the phones still recording. Her shoes squeaked against the floor as she pushed open the bathroom door and locked herself inside the nearest stall. She slid down against the cold tile wall, her back hitting it harder than she intended. Milk dripped from her hair onto the floor. Her breathing came out broken, uneven, shallow. She pressed her hands over her face and cried silently, terrified someone would hear her, terrified that even her pain might become entertainment. When she finally looked up, she saw her reflection in the scratched metal door of the stall. She barely recognized herself. That night, she stood alone in her bedroom, staring at the mirror. Her hair was dry now, her clothes were clean, her face looked normal again, but something inside her was permanently altered. "I will never let them laugh at me again," she whispered. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rage, it was a vow. The bullying didn't stop after that day. It became routine. Whispers followed her through hallways, snickers echoed behind her back. Comments were thrown casually, disguised as jokes that weren't jokes at all. Online was worse. Screenshots from the cafeteria spread faster than she could report them. Memes appeared. Anonymous comments told her to hide, to disappear, to stop pretending she mattered. She tried to ignore it. She failed. She started skipping lunch, then dinner, then entire days of eating. Her mother noticed the silence before she noticed the weight loss. "You haven't been talking much," her mother said one night, watching her carefully. "Is something wrong?" "I'm just tired," she replied. It was the first of many lies. She avoided mirrors, avoided cameras, avoided smiling. The girl who once laughed loudly now spoke only when necessary. But every insult stayed with her. Every laugh burned into her memory. Instead of destroying her completely, it did something unexpected. It sharpened her. At 16, she walked into a gym for the first time. Not because she loved fitness, not because she dreamed of beauty titles, because she hated feeling powerless. The treadmill exhausted her in minutes. Her legs shook. Her lungs burned. She cried in the locker room when no one was watching. But she came back the next day, and the next, and the next. At 17, she entered a small local modeling contest. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't expect anything. She didn't win. She didn't even place. The judges smiled politely and told her she had potential, but a long way to go. She thanked them calmly. Then she sat alone in her car and cried until her chest hurt. But she didn't quit. She studied nutrition. She trained harder. She practiced walking, posture, speaking. While others partied, she trained. While others slept, she worked. Her body began to change slowly. Her confidence followed even slower. At 19, she won her first small local title. No cameras, no headlines, just a plastic crown and a quiet moment of validation. It wasn't about beauty. It was about survival. Because the girl who once stood soaked in milk in a cafeteria was no longer helpless. She was becoming someone else, and the world had no idea what was coming. The first small crown rested lightly on her head, but it felt heavier than anything she had ever worn before. It wasn't gold. It wasn't expensive. It barely even shined under the weak stage lights. And yet, when she looked at herself in the mirror that night, she didn't see a title. She saw proof. Proof that the girl who once stood frozen in a school cafeteria, soaked in milk and laughter, had not disappeared. She had endured. She had survived. The applause from that small local stage faded quickly. By the next morning, the world had returned to normal. There were no headlines, no interviews, no strangers stopping her on the street. Just school, just work, just the quiet pressure of reality settling back in. But something inside her refused to go back to sleep. She returned to the gym with a different energy now. Not desperate, not angry, focused. She began waking up before sunrise, slipping on her running shoes while the city was still asleep. The streets were empty, the air cold and sharp. Her breath fogged in front of her face as she ran past closed shops and dark windows. Every step reminded her why she had started. Every drop of sweat carried a memory she refused to relive. At school, people still whispered. Some pretended nothing had ever happened. Others looked at her differently now, not kinder, just confused. As if they couldn't understand why she hadn't stayed small, quiet, and invisible. The boy from the cafeteria still laughed loudly in the hallways, still untouchable, still confident. She avoided him whenever she could, but she never forgot him. Some memories don't fade, they wait. At 18, she graduated. When her name was called on stage, the applause was polite, respectful, forgettable, nothing special, nothing personal. But as she walked back to her seat, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Calm. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a weight dragging her backward. It felt like fuel pushing her forward. College was harder than she expected. The competition was real now. Other girls were disciplined, polished, and confident in ways she had once believed were unreachable. Many of them had been preparing for this world since childhood. She failed more auditions than she passed. You're not ready yet. You need more refinement. Come back next year. Each rejection stung, but it no longer shattered her. She had already been broken once. This wasn't breaking. This was shaping. She learned how to speak slowly and clearly, how to control her posture, how to walk into a room without shrinking herself. She practiced interviews alone in her dorm room, repeating answers until her voice stopped trembling. Some nights, doubt crept in quietly. What if they were right? What if she was pretending? What if the girl in the mirror was still just the girl from the cafeteria, wearing confidence like a costume? Those nights were the hardest. She would sit on her bed with the lights off, phone glowing in her hands, scrolling through images she had sworn never to look at again. Screenshots, comments, that old video of milk spilling over her hair. Her chest would tighten until it hurt, and then she would stand up. She would tie her hair back, put on her sneakers, and go train. At 20, she entered a regional competition with no expectations. This time, she didn't walk onto the stage hoping to be liked. She walked on knowing she belonged. When her name was called as a finalist, her heart skipped. When she placed second, she smiled, genuinely. Not because she was satisfied, but because she was no longer afraid of losing. That year, she worked harder than ever. Her schedule became brutal. Classes in the morning, training in the afternoon, work in the evening, practice interviews late into the night. Her friends worried about her. "You're doing too much," one of them said. She shook her head. "I'm doing exactly enough." At 21, she entered the national pageant. The scale was different now, the pressure relentless. Cameras followed her everywhere. Every word, every gesture, every mistake felt magnified. She watched the other contestants carefully, not with jealousy, but respect. They were strong, prepared, confident. So was she. When the judges asked about her past, her voice didn't shake. "I grew up learning what it feels like to be underestimated," she said calmly. "And I learned that resilience doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent." The room fell silent. When the winner was announced, time slowed. Her name echoed through the auditorium. She didn't cry. She closed her eyes. For a brief moment, she saw a cafeteria. A plastic tray hitting the floor, milk dripping onto cold tiles. Then she opened her eyes. She was Miss America. The title changed everything and nothing. The world began watching her now. Interviews, charity events, cameras everywhere she went. People praised her strength, her beauty, her story. But with visibility came pressure. Every mistake felt heavier. Every comment cut deeper. Online critics returned, this time wearing different masks. "She's overrated. She's not that special. They just want a dramatic story." Some nights, doubt returned quietly. But she had learned something important. Pain no longer owned her. She owned it. Training intensified as she prepared for the international stage. Miss Universe. The word still felt unreal. The expectations were crushing, the spotlight unforgiving. She traveled constantly, barely sleeping, barely resting. Her body ached. Her mind raced. One night, alone in a hotel room thousands of miles from home, she stood in front of the mirror again. She studied her reflection carefully, not searching for flaws, searching for truth. "I made it this far," she whispered. "I'm not stopping now." The competition was fierce. Women from all over the world, different languages, different cultures, different stories, the same hunger. On the final night, standing backstage, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from history. She thought about who she had been. She thought about who she had become. When the crown was placed on her head, the weight was real this time. Gold, heavy, unmistakable. She was Miss Universe. And somewhere beneath the applause and flashing lights, the girl from the cafeteria finally exhaled. But the story wasn't finished, because 10 years after that day in the cafeteria, an envelope arrived, a high school reunion, and the past was about to walk straight back into her life. The venue grew louder as the evening progressed. More people arrived. More drinks were poured. Conversations overlapped, filling the room with a mix of nostalgia and quiet competition. Everyone seemed eager to prove that life had turned out well for them. She moved through it all calmly. No rush, no nerves. She had walked into rooms far more intimidating than this. Still, the atmosphere stirred something deep inside her. Not fear, not anger. Awareness. The strange feeling of standing inside a memory that no longer fit her. Across the room, he kept glancing in her direction. Not staring. Not yet. Just enough to make it clear that she had caught his attention. He laughed loudly at a joke someone made, then checked again to see if she was watching. She wasn't. She stood near a table, listening politely as two former classmates talked about their jobs, nodding at the right moments. But she felt him approaching before she saw him. Confidence had a rhythm. He stepped beside her, close enough to be noticed, holding his drink casually. "So," he said, smiling, "how do you know everyone here?" She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "I went to school with them," she replied. He laughed. "Fair enough. Guess that was a dumb question." She smiled politely, neutral, controlled. He introduced himself, mentioning his name, his business, the city he lived in now. He spoke smoothly, effortlessly, slipping small details into the conversation. Investments, partnerships, travel. Status without sounding desperate. She listened. Not impressed, not offended, just observant. "And you?" he asked. "What do you do?" She paused for half a second. "I work in public service," she said. His eyebrows lifted. "Really? What kind?" She met his gaze. "The kind that involves responsibility." He chuckled. "Sounds important." "It is," she replied calmly. Something about her tone made him hesitate. He leaned back slightly, studying her more closely now. The way she stood, the way she spoke. The confidence that didn't ask for permission. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "you've got this familiar energy, like I've seen you before." She smiled. "Most people say that." He laughed again, but this time it was quieter, thoughtful. Around them, people began to notice. Heads turned subtly. Someone whispered her name to someone else. Phones appeared, not raised yet, but ready. Recognition was spreading. Not his, everyone else's. A former classmate approached them cautiously. "Hey," the woman said, eyes wide. "Sorry to interrupt, but are you—" She nodded gently. "Yes." The woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I didn't even recognize you." He frowned slightly. "Recognize her from where?" The woman glanced between them, unsure. "From everywhere," she said. She raised a hand, stopping her. "It's okay," she said softly. "We were just talking." The woman nodded quickly and stepped back, clearly overwhelmed. He watched her walk away, then turned back to her with renewed curiosity. "You famous or something?" he asked, half joking. She tilted her head slightly. "Does it matter?" He smiled. "I guess not. Still, impressive." Music shifted in the background. Slower now, softer. Couples began moving toward the center of the room. He glanced at the dance floor, then back at her. "Want to dance?" he asked, confidence returning. "Seems like the kind of night for it." A few nearby conversations quieted. People watched openly now. She felt the weight of the moment settle in, not as pressure, but as clarity. This was it. 10 years of silence, 10 years of distance, condensed into one simple question. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at him fully now, not the successful man in front of her, but the boy he used to be, the smirk, the ease, the assumption that the world would always say yes. "I don't usually dance with strangers," she said calmly. He laughed. "We're not strangers. We went to the same school, remember?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "I remember." Something in her voice shifted. He felt it. "You okay?" he asked, confused. She smiled again, softer this time, almost kind. "I'm fine," she said. "I just prefer honesty." He shrugged. "Fair enough. So, is that a no?" She leaned slightly closer, close enough that only he could hear. "Not yet." That single phrase did more to his confidence than any compliment could have. Around them, whispers grew louder. "Is that really her?" "No way." "I swear it is." He noticed the attention now, straightened his jacket, smiled wider. He enjoyed this. "What do you say?" he said again, louder this time, clearly aware of the audience. "We give them something to talk about?" She looked around the room, faces watching, phones ready, history holding its breath. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs, smiles, quiet excitement. He extended his hand. She took it. The room shifted. As they walked toward the dance floor together, she felt none of the fear she once carried. No shame, no hesitation, only control. They moved in time with the music, his hand steady at her waist, hers resting lightly on his shoulder. He leaned closer. "You know," he said, "I'm really glad you came tonight." She met his eyes. "So am I." He smiled, misreading everything. Around them, the reunion had transformed into a spectacle. The successful man, the beautiful woman, the perfect moment. No one knew what was coming next, not even him. Because the dance wasn't the moment of reckoning, it was the setup. And when the music stopped, the truth would finally speak. The music slowed, stretching each note longer than the last. They moved together easily, almost effortlessly. To anyone watching, it looked natural, elegant, like two people perfectly in sync. But inside her, everything was precise, measured. She wasn't dancing for him. She was dancing through memory. His hand rested at her waist, confident but respectful, as if he believed he had already won something. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, letting the music carry his words. "So," he said casually, "you never really told me what you do." She smiled faintly. "I represent people," she replied. "Sounds political," he joked. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes it's personal." He nodded, pretending to understand. They turned slowly under the lights. She noticed people around the room stopping what they were doing. Conversations faded. Phones were no longer subtle. This wasn't just a reunion anymore. It was a moment. He noticed it too. Straightened his posture. Smiled wider. "You've got a presence," he said. "People listen when you're around." She met his eyes. "They always have," she replied. He laughed, missing the weight of her words. When the music ended, the applause came naturally. Not loud, not forced, curious. He stepped back slightly, still holding her hand. "See," he said, "told you it was a good idea." She didn't pull away. Not yet. The DJ shifted tracks, preparing the next song. The microphone crackled briefly as someone adjusted it near the stage. He glanced toward it, then back to her. "You know," he said, loud enough for nearby people to hear. We should catch up properly. Maybe grab a drink somewhere quieter. A few people smiled knowingly. Someone whispered. She tilted her head. Why quieter? She asked. He shrugged. Less distractions. She looked around. At a reunion? She said calmly. I think distractions are kind of the point. A few people laughed softly. He smiled, unfazed. Fair. Still, I don't usually meet people like you here. She raised an eyebrow. People like me? Confident, he corrected quickly. Grounded. She studied him. He still spoke the way he always had, choosing words carefully when necessary, assuming understanding would follow. You seem successful, she said. He took the bait immediately. Yeah, he replied. I've done pretty well for myself. He began talking about his company, the offices, the growth, the deals that almost happened and the ones that definitely did. He didn't exaggerate, but he didn't downplay anything either. Money was his language. She listened patiently, not impressed, not offended, just waiting. And you? He asked again. You never really answered. She glanced toward the stage. They'll introduce me soon, she said. His smile paused. Introduce you? She nodded. Why? He asked, genuinely curious now. She met his gaze. They asked me to say a few words. Around them, attention sharpened. Someone nearby whispered her name, louder this time. He noticed the shift. What's going on? He asked, half joking. She didn't answer. The microphone squealed softly as the host stepped onto the stage. All right, everyone, the host said cheerfully. If I could get your attention for a moment. The room quieted. He turned slightly, drink still in hand, eyes moving between the stage and her. We have someone very special with us tonight, the host continued. Someone who graduated from this school and went on to do something extraordinary. A ripple moved through the crowd. Phones lifted openly now. He frowned. She felt his hand loosen slightly. The host smiled toward her. Please welcome our very own Miss Universe. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, applause. People turned fully toward her. He froze. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head to look at her. Really look at her. His mouth opened slightly. You're, he began. She smiled. Yes. The applause grew louder. People cheered her name. He stepped back half a step, suddenly unsure of where to stand. I didn't, he said, stopping himself. I mean, wow. She inclined her head politely. Thank you. The host gestured for her to join him on stage. She stepped away from him smoothly, calmly, walking through the space that had once terrified her. The crowd parted instinctively. She climbed the steps, the microphone cool in her hand. She turned to face the room. And then, she looked straight at him. The room went quiet. I was asked to share a memory, she said softly, from when I was here. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. She paused. 10 seconds, enough time for discomfort to settle. 10 years ago, she continued, I stood in this school's cafeteria. A few faces shifted. She spoke slowly, clearly. I was 15, and I learned something that day. The room held its breath. I learned how loud laughter can be when it's aimed at someone who can't fight back. A murmur spread. He felt it hit him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. There was a boy, she said, still looking directly at him. Popular, confident, untouchable. People glanced around. Some already knew. He decided to make an example of me. The room was silent now. He poured milk over my head and laughed. A sharp intake of breath echoed somewhere in the back. Phones trembled in hands. She let the words hang. I didn't cry in front of anyone, she said, but I remember every face that laughed. Her gaze never left him. His chest tightened. He finally recognized her. Not her face, her voice, her stillness. The room seemed to tilt. She smiled gently. "And I want to thank that boy." The crowd reacted instantly. Confusion, shock. He stared at her, pale. "Because without him," she continued, "I might have believed the lies." She lowered the microphone slightly. "But tonight isn't about the past," she said. "It's about growth." She looked at him one last time. "Some of us grow forward," she said calmly. "Others just grow older." Silence, then applause. Not polite, not small, thunderous. She handed the microphone back to the host and stepped down from the stage. People surrounded her instantly. Congratulations, praise, awe. He stood alone, unmoving, because for the first time in his life, the room wasn't laughing with him. It was watching him. The applause slowly faded, but the silence it left behind was heavier than any noise. People returned to their conversations, though nothing sounded the same anymore. Laughter was quieter now. Words were chosen more carefully. The room had shifted. He still hadn't moved. He stood where she had left him, drink untouched in his hand, eyes unfocused. Around him, people avoided eye contact, not out of cruelty, but discomfort, as if standing too close to him might make them part of the moment they had just witnessed. For the first time in his life, attention didn't feel powerful. It felt exposing. He swallowed hard and straightened his jacket, forcing his body to remember confidence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. He was the one who controlled rooms, who decided the tone, not her. He scanned the crowd until he found her again. She stood near the far side of the room, surrounded by people congratulating her, former classmates, teachers, faces filled with admiration and regret. She listened politely, smiled, thanked them, never once looking back at him. That hurt more than the speech. He waited until the group thinned before approaching again. Slower this time, less certain. "Hey," he said quietly, forcing a casual tone. "That was unexpected." She turned to face him calmly. "So was the milk," she replied. Not sharp, not angry, accurate. He winced, then laughed weakly. "Look, I didn't realize it was you. I mean, that was a long time ago." She nodded. "It was." He exhaled, relieved she wasn't yelling. "People do stupid things when they're kids." She studied him carefully. "Do they?" she asked. "Or do they just do honest things?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said quickly. "It was a joke. Everyone was joking back then." She tilted her head slightly. "Were they?" she asked. "Because I remember crying alone in a bathroom." He opened his mouth, closed it. A few nearby conversations slowed. People were listening again. He lowered his voice. "Look, I'm sorry if that affected you. Obviously, you turned out fine." That was the wrong sentence. She inhaled slowly. "I didn't turn out fine," she said quietly. "I worked to become fine." The words landed softly, but firmly. He nodded rapidly, trying to regain control. Right, of course. And hey, maybe we can talk later? Somewhere private?" She glanced around the room. "Why private?" she asked. He hesitated. "Less pressure." She smiled faintly. "Pressure is what makes things honest," she said. He forced a laugh. "You always talk like this?" She met his eyes. "Only when it matters." He looked around again, noticing the way people were watching now, not openly, but attentively. Waiting. He straightened his posture once more. "Listen," he said louder, regaining some confidence. "I didn't recognize you because you've changed. A lot." She nodded. "So have you." He smiled, encouraged. "Exactly. People grow." "Yes," she agreed. "Some do." The pause stretched. "Anyway, he said, clapping his hands together lightly. Maybe we should dance again. You know, reset the mood. The room went still. She looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked at his face. And then she smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, clearly. No, she said. Just one word. The rejection echoed louder than any speech. A few people gasped quietly. He blinked. No? She nodded. No. He laughed nervously. Come on. You already danced with me once. She didn't move. That was before, she said. Before what? He asked. Before you tried to pretend nothing happened, she replied. Silence spread. He felt heat rush to his face. I said I was sorry. She held his gaze. You apologized to feel better, she said calmly. Not to make things right. The truth hit him hard. You don't get to decide when someone else is healed, she continued. You only get to decide who you are now. He clenched his jaw. And who am I now? He asked sharply. She didn't hesitate. Someone who still thinks confidence is louder than accountability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He scoffed. You think this makes you better than me? She shook her head. No, she said softly. It makes me free. That broke something in him. So what? You came here just to embarrass me? He snapped. She raised an eyebrow. I came here because I was invited, she replied. You embarrassed yourself. The words were simple, devastating. He looked around. No one laughed. No one defended him. For the first time, he felt small. I guess congratulations are in order, he muttered bitterly. You got your revenge. She leaned in slightly, close enough that only he could hear. This isn't revenge, she said quietly. Revenge needs anger. She stepped back. This is closure. She turned away from him. The crowd parted instinctively as she walked through them, calm, composed, unbothered. He remained where he stood, alone, surrounded by people who suddenly remembered who he had always been. And for the first time in his life, no amount of money, charm, or confidence could buy him out of the moment. Because this time, the laughter was gone, and the silence belonged to him. The night didn't end when she walked away from him. It only began to settle. The reunion slowly returned to motion, but it was no longer the same room it had been an hour earlier. Conversations resumed in lower voices. Laughter returned carefully, uncertain of itself, as if people were afraid their own past might overhear them. She moved through the room one last time, not rushed, not triumphant, complete. People approached her cautiously now, as if unsure whether they had the right. Some offered congratulations they genuinely meant. Others offered apologies they had rehearsed silently for years, waiting for a moment they never thought would come. I didn't say anything back then, one woman whispered, eyes lowered. I should have. She nodded gently. We were all kids. A man she barely recognized cleared his throat, shifting his weight nervously. You didn't deserve that, he said. She smiled politely. I know. That was enough. She didn't demand more. She didn't need explanations. Closure didn't require a crowd. She stayed just long enough to feel the weight lift. Then she left. Outside, the air was cool and still, wrapping around her like a quiet reassurance. The noise of the reunion faded behind her as the door closed softly, sealing the past inside. She stood beneath the streetlights for a moment, breathing in the silence. For the first time, the memories didn't rush back to fill the quiet. They stayed where they belonged, finished, not erased, resolved. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a message from her assistant, another from her mother, notifications stacking quickly as videos from the reunion began circulating online. Short clips, her words, the silence that followed, his face when recognition finally arrived. She didn't open them. Some things didn't need to be replayed. She slid into her car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. Across town, the reunion continued without her. He sat alone now at a table near the back of the room. His drink sat untouched in front of him, ice slowly melting. The confidence he had carried all night drained away with every passing minute. People didn't confront him. They didn't mock him. They did something worse. They avoided him. Former friends glanced in his direction, then turned away. Conversations shifted when he approached. Laughter died the moment he entered a group. For the first time in his life, he was invisible, and it terrified him. He replayed the night over and over in his mind. The dance, the applause, the moment he finally understood who she was, and who he had been. He remembered the cafeteria clearly now. The milk, the laughter, how easy it had felt, how harmless he had believed it was. For the first time, he wondered what it must have felt like to stand where she once stood, to have nowhere to look, to have no one step in, to carry something humiliating for years without anyone knowing. The thought tightened his chest. He didn't leave when the night ended. He stayed until the lights brightened, until the music stopped, until the room returned to an empty hall filled with discarded cups and echoes. Some lessons arrive late, but they arrive all the same. Weeks passed. Life moved forward. She returned to her routine. Events, meetings, interviews, charity work, long flights across quiet skies. But something inside her had changed, not weakened, softened. The tension she had carried for years was gone. In its place was space, calm, breath. Reporters asked about the reunion during interviews. She smiled evenly. "It reminded me how far I've come," she said, "and how far some people still need to go." She never mentioned his name. She didn't need to. Online, the story spread far beyond the reunion. People debated it endlessly. Some praised her strength and restraint. Others criticized her composure, saying she should have been kinder, quieter, less direct. She ignored it all. She had learned something important. Growth didn't require approval. Months later, she visited a school. A small one. Quiet. Familiar. The gym smelled like old floors and fresh paint. A group of teenage girls sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide, listening carefully as she spoke. She told them about discipline, about self-respect, about not letting other people decide who they would become. One girl raised her hand timidly. "Did it ever stop hurting?" she asked. The room went silent. She paused, then answered honestly. "No," she said, "but it stopped controlling me." The girl nodded slowly, holding on to the words like something fragile and important. After the talk, a young black girl approached her quietly, shoulders hunched, eyes uncertain. "I get laughed at too," she whispered. She knelt down so they were eye level. "Listen to me," she said gently. "What they see right now isn't the whole story." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Promise?" she asked. She smiled. "I'm standing here," she said. "That's the promise." That night, back home, she stood once more in front of a mirror, not checking posture, not checking flaws, just looking. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a crown. She saw a woman who had faced her past without flinching and walked away without carrying it. Somewhere far away, he scrolled through his phone, reading comments he couldn't reply to, watching the world celebrate someone he had once reduced to a joke. And for the first time, he understood something he never had before. You don't always pay for cruelty immediately. Sometimes you pay when the person you tried to destroy stands above you and chooses peace instead of revenge. Years later, people would forget his name. They wouldn't forget hers. And that was never the goal. The goal was freedom. Because the most powerful thing she ever did was not winning crowns, not standing on stages, not speaking into microphones. It was walking away from a room that once laughed at her, without carrying the laughter with her. Some stories end with applause, others end with silence, and the strongest ones end with understanding. What happened that night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving someone wrong in front of a crowd. And it certainly wasn't about humiliating a person who had already exposed himself. It was about something much quieter, something much harder. It was about growth. Because real growth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need witnesses to feel valid. It simply exists. For a long time, she believed that healing would feel dramatic, that one day she would wake up and feel powerful, fearless, untouched by the past. But that's not how healing works. Healing is subtle. It's the moment you walk into a room that once terrified you and your heartbeat stays calm. It's the moment you remember something painful and it no longer controls your breath. It's realizing that the people who once defined you no longer have the authority to do so. She didn't erase the past. She outgrew it. And that distinction matters. Because forgetting is fragile. Growth is permanent. What made her story powerful wasn't the crowns, not the titles, not the stages or the cameras or the applause. It was the discipline she practiced when no one was watching, the mornings she woke up tired and trained anyway, the nights she doubted herself and chose to continue. That's the part most people never see. We admire results, but we ignore process. And yet, process is where character is built. The boy from the cafeteria believed power was loud. He believed confidence meant dominance. He believed that control was something you took from others before they could take it from you. He wasn't born cruel. He was taught that cruelty had no consequences, until it did. And even then, the consequence wasn't public shaming. It was irrelevance. Because nothing humbles a person faster than realizing they no longer matter in the story they once controlled. She didn't need to punish him. Life already had. That's the uncomfortable truth many people avoid. You don't have to fight everyone who hurts you. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is move forward without them. There's a reason her response stayed calm. Anger keeps you connected to the past. Peace breaks the connection. And she chose peace, not because she was weak, but because she was done being owned by memory. We often think justice looks like balance, pain for pain, loss for loss. But justice, in its quiet form, looks like this. The person who was hurt becomes whole. The person who caused the hurt is left to face themselves. No audience required. If you're listening to this and you've ever been laughed at, humiliated, or reduced to something smaller than who you are, understand this. What they see in you right now is not the full picture. It never was. People judge from moments. Life judges from consistency. And consistency always wins. The version of you that feels powerless today is not permanent. The pain you carry now is not a life sentence. It's information. It teaches you what to avoid. It teaches you what to build. It teaches you what kind of person you will never become. And one day, without realizing it, you'll look back and notice something strange. You won't feel angry. You won't feel hurt. You'll feel distant, as if that version of you belonged to someone else. That's when you know you've grown. Because the goal was never to be admired. The goal was never to be remembered. The goal was freedom. Freedom from replaying moments that no longer exist. Freedom from explaining yourself to people who never listened. Freedom from shrinking to make others comfortable. And that freedom doesn't come from winning. It comes from choosing yourself, again and again, when it's easier not to. The world will always have people who laugh too quickly, who judge too easily, who assume too much from too little. You don't need to correct them. Your life will. And when the day comes that you stand where she stood, calm, grounded, untouched by the noise, you'll realize something important. The past doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. And the laughter that once followed you, it stops mattering the moment you stop carrying it, because the strongest ending to any story isn't applause, it's peace.